Okay, good evening to everyone and welcome to Campus Lit Week 2022. My name is Darren Gibson and I have with me 5 first-year MFA students, Laura Ann Phillips, Carolyn Whittier, Daniela Placid, Lynette Hazel, and Desiree Noel. And this evening, all we are going to do is have a very open, very relaxed, frank conversation about the process of writing, about the MFA program itself and what we are gaining or what we hope to gain from it, the process of developing our own writing abilities and what we may hope to accomplish as young writers in this world that we are in right now. So I would just like to open our conversation by asking why, any one of you, why did you actually enter into the MFA program? What did you hope to achieve?
Well, one of the things that occurred to me was I began writing from a very young age, and it was always something that ran alongside my professional life without ever really giving much attention to it. And in the recent past, I began to give attention to it and began dabbling with shards of novels and short stories and so, but I kept running into these walls beyond which I realized I could not go. I needed particular tools, but it never really materialized. I never thought of where those tools could come from, apart from YouTube, until I attended the Bocas Lit festivals. It happened that when the festival began, I was not in Trinidad. So when I came back home, I realized that I could attend these festivals. And it was there doing those different workshops, and so that it was suggested that this was something that was an option. And so that began the process of my beginning to prepare to come and finally making the decision to enter the MFA program.
Okay. Anyone? Carolyn, Lynette?
Well, I signed up for the MFA program, to be quite honest, to develop the discipline of writing consistently. I think that as a mother, working mother, throughout undergrad, it was difficult to give attention to writing, the attention that it deserved to actually develop and move from mere talent into something more like craft. And I felt as though the environment would have provided that, given me the knowledge and helped to develop my skill set. Because just like Laura said, I've always felt an imperative and impetus to write. When I was younger, that was how I worked through, feelings and, just how to put your thoughts down on paper. I gravitated towards that. So it was natural that I would want to write, and also being a very a I don't want to say, I read any and everything. So I'm a voracious reader as well. So it seemed a very natural thing to want to express myself more publicly in the literary style. So I entered the program for that discipline, as well as to develop an entire toolkit of craft, that skill set.
Mentioning some really important things, but sure. Okay, yeah, Carolyn.
Yes. So I think for me, I mean, I grew up in a family where there were books everywhere. My father used to buy all literature books first. And I think having been reading so much, and in undergrad, I was exposed to the creative writing and the prose and poetry. And from then on, I started looking at the MFA program. And I was like, if I really want to write, because I had been dabbling a little bit in poetry, when things affect you, you write. I had a journal, so I would write. And I think from there on, I became interested in the MFA program. And I thought, okay, here is a space to get some feedback, because you basically write for yourself, So I get some feedback. And as Lynette said, you'd pick up that toolkit, because I knew that, okay, this work, I'm not sure, is my work good? What is this? And I would have that fear of people reading my work, So I said, okay, the MFA program is there. So I'll try to get into the program and see where it takes me. So
Good, thanks. Yeah, man. Daniela, Desiree?
For me personally, I think,
Sorry.
Go ahead. Daniela, you could go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it felt like a natural next step, I
Natural
would have
next
said
step.
before amongst you guys. Yeah.
Mhm.
I would have said before amongst you guys that I was writing ever since I learned how to write, So in school and everything, I was always the entertainer. Like I would write stories, bring it to school, everyone would read it, like pass it around kind of way, and we talk about it, that kind of thing. And so I was always drawn to literature, drawn to words, drawn to poetry and expressing myself in words, always good at language and literature. So after I finished with Cape, of course, my bachelor's was in literature was the next step. And then after that, this was the natural next step. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. Organic movement. Desiree?
for me, I think I need to actually thank the pandemic for actually being here. Because of the pandemic, I got time to actually relax and focus on something I actually enjoy. Because while I've studied other subjects, I never actually delved into creative writing, although I always loved it since a child. So because of the pandemic, we're home, we have online classes, I had the opportunity to actually focus on something I enjoy within this time period. Because life is short, so actually doing something I enjoy was a motivation for me to actually pick up the MFA during this time. Because I've always loved writing, but this is the opportunity for me to actually be among persons who also love writing as well. This is the first for me. So I really actually graduated to this program for that actual experience to have other writers, like-minded individuals, study something we enjoy.
Yeah, boy. I mean, I think there were some key things that came out just in that. I guess you could say like a basic introduction into your life in writing, at least within the MFA program. And a couple of things I just want to just ask about, because it opens up some interesting thoughts. Lynette just spoke about talent versus craft. And she mentioned as well this particular thing that I think most of us have to confront at some point in time, which is discipline. There are some persons gifted with a natural self-discipline, but for most of the writers that I've ever met, they have to find ways of bringing themselves to the work. Now, the MFA program has deadlines. I mean, you're working towards grades, you're working towards deadlines. And it's not self-imposed deadlines, the deadlines are imposed upon you. And that in itself is its own force. But if outside of this program now, after you've graduated, how do you see yourself negotiating with actually setting goals for yourself that are concrete in a sense, and don't find yourself falling back into this realm of procrastination and all this?
It's going to be a crunch. But I think yes, the difference this time is that I have a better idea of the kind of time that is needed. In the past, when I gave time to writing, or even trying to obey the deadlines in semester 1 and 2, I recognized that the time I allotted to the projects was simply not enough time. And so that it really gives you a better idea of what is needed to craft, not so much volume, but how much time is needed to craft quality text material, and the kind of time that is needed for planning and crafting and the intricacies of that. So I think that has been one of the values of the MFA, to really give you a better idea of what is needed, so you have a better idea of how to block your time.
Daniela, you were going to say? Yeah.
I resonate with what Laura said a lot, but also for me, discipline comes in intervals. So like there are times when, I can't for myself.
It almost sounds like a contradiction in terms. Discipline comes in intervals.
Yes.
Yeah? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes it would be a struggle, I guess, to bring myself to the work, or like I would have ideas and just leave them as ideas and just think, I'm thinking about the story in my head, fleshing it out, but it never makes it to paper, or never makes it to a Word document, But then at other times, it's almost as if the completion of a story is its own fulfillment. So that alone would drive me to complete it. But it happens like, I guess, menstruation, like at different periods, you are most fertile. At different periods, you aren't, So it's like that for me. Yeah.
Well, in that case, if I may ask and open it out a little further again, I mean, Lynette could continue to just answer that first question, but based on what Daniela just said, is it how then do you think you could tell the difference between a period of just letting the soil regain its nutrients and a period of indiscipline or laziness or procrastination? How would you know the difference? Or is it that we're still working this out along the way?
Yes, yes, very much still working it out. I don't think it's like there are strict lines, or at least not lines that I can see right now. But yeah, working it out.
Yeah, man, cool, isn't it?
Well, I am going to try to not go down that road, because I think for me it may be too easy to slide into I'm not inspired, I'm not motivated,
Right,
and
right,
this. And
right.
I read somewhere, I can't remember who is the author who said this, but it spoke so strongly to me. It's just get it written.
Yeah.
I procrastinate because I don't know where we ever got this idea that we just want to produce perfection in one draft. And the idea of just getting it written speaks to discipline. You can go back to it, recraft it, make it better, but just get it written. And I think our first semester certainly um, showed me the truth of that. Just get it written. Forget about having the best idea, and yes, that will come, as Daniela said, at intervals, that those fertile periods.
Yeah.
But in the periods where you're not feeling as fertile, just write it out onto the page, just get something written, and then go back to it, edit. It may change directions several times, but just get it written.
Interesting. Desiree, from what I remember from last semester, you were the one of the, I think it's between you and Laura in particular, that seemed to have you don't have these restrictions when it comes to writing. Words, if anything, will come from you, both you and Laura, pretty easily. And I suspect, particularly with you, that they tend to have a very structured way of approaching your work, of thinking and so on. So first of all, I just want to ask to be sure if you agree with that statement. And then in that case, that will be a counterpoint. It'll be a little bit different from how everybody else is speaking about trying to work themselves into a gear to keep disciplined. What was the process for you?
For me, in terms of discipline, like having everyone here in class actually motivates me to actually write. So when we have like weekly readings and whatnot, I'm actually motivated to write. I know I have peers who are going to read it and whatnot. In terms of writing a story, once I have an idea, usually it flows. So I can't like say discipline things like every day I write some. To me, I'll like give it a whole day or a whole weekend. Let's focus on the story and let's write it one time, leave it alone for a while, then maybe come back to it some days after. By going like in one go and go straight with it. Not like say I have a piece today, another piece tomorrow. My mind can't handle that. So my discipline is like focusing on it. It's like no distraction, just focus on one story, keep writing. If it's an all-nighter, just keep writing. Then leave it alone maybe and come back afterwards. And having my peers here and people to actually comment on my work is actually motivating me as well. Because before this, I didn't really have these persons here. It's kind of a circle. So I was within this last year, I've actually written more than the last couple of years because I have this circle of persons here to actually bounce off ideas or hear what they think of it. So having persons with you.
I think Desiree is freezing up a little bit. Your vocals are freezing up a little bit.
Having persons with you to actually motivate you, I think is essential for the discipline as well.
Okay, indeed. I think that's a key thing. And I remember past MFA students. Go ahead, Daniela.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask us a question. And so if your approach then to writing is, get everything you have to say out and then return to it, but you just have to get it out now. How do you think you would approach writing a novel or a much longer piece of work when, it's going to take time to really get everything out? What would be your approach in a situation like that?
Yeah.
I'm actually experimenting with that now because I want to write a novel. So I'm trying to figure out like how to actually craft a very long story. So I'm thinking like if you like do different scenes, so like craft write a whole scene in one go, then stop, instead of writing whole novels, like break up a novel into parts. So I'm actually experimenting and see how to actually write a novel right now. It's a work in progress. I haven't fully gotten the gist of it, how to do it, but I'm experimenting that right now.
I would imagine people would have different approaches on that as well. As some people would maybe, I like the thought of the scenes, so maybe whole chapters. You know, that is because I was thinking, Desiree, while you were speaking, that I'm sorry, there's just interjected there. It's a similar process with me because even if I can't, if I'm doing a short story, I like to conceptualize what the thing will look like. At least I want a beginning and I want an end so that I can work towards that end. Now, it may take a few drafts. It often does. I seldom would consider that. I would never consider a first draft perfection, you know. But once that hole is there, that shell, then it's possible to go back and flesh it, you know. So I thoroughly enjoy that. To use a bad gardening image, you know, plants tend to love to grow together. Plants like communities, and you could get, so even if you grow several different plants who are very individual, they thrive when they are together. And I've always been reluctant to share my work with others, but I have found in this group, one of the things that has been useful has really been having like-minded individuals who can share their own individual styles. We have very different styles, very different processes, but it's so healthy when you're able to share that. It helps you with your own arrogance, because every writer has an ego. But it helps you to manage your ego. It helps you to use your ego in very efficient ways. You know, so that I found has been a very valuable aspect of this program.
Most certainly. Carolyn, yes, go ahead.
Yes, in terms of discipline, I just want to go back to that discipline because, listen, it's discipline with a capital D all the way through, because having to juggle life and write, honestly, I don't know how I got through last semester. It was real pace, plenty pace, but it really, I must say, it really helped me, prepared me for this semester, as a matter of fact. And, you know, getting on with that every week piece of writing. And I think in terms of the longer piece of writing, let's say writing my novel, and I remember somebody saying something somewhere, you know, it's like you're carrying a suitcase inside your head. You want to unpack it as you go along until you reach then. And it's how fast you unpack it, you know. So really keeping deadlines, I think, is really, really important in writing this in book. And I think Daniela said, you know, little parts of little spaces of discipline. But I think I understand what she means, because there are times when you really, really need that little rest. Maybe they're just to internalize things. And I don't know if that's what she's talking about, but I feel that same way. But I see it as the challenge, but this MFA, how it's structured, I think, is really helping.
Good.
Yeah, I think what what you're alluding to, just to, if we use our local parlance, you know, the thing had to kusume a little bit now. The initial expression of the idea, you get that out, you know, you put it out there on the page, and then you let kusume a little bit, and then you come back to it. Yeah.
Right. I think, if anything, one of my thoughts was that sometimes we generally tend to overthink things, so that oftentimes we may be very sensitive to the fact that we need to take a rest, and at the same time, our rest could carry on for much longer than we intended. And because we're always thinking about, are we working as we're supposed to, more and more doubts may start to creep in. It may start to creep in, for some of us at least, which is actually the next issue that I just want to look at, because it's something that Laura just talked about, the ego of the writer, the arrogance of the writer, which seems to be so weird. Because if anything, the writer, particularly the young or the student writer or the unpublished writer, and according to my poll, at least even after having written how many books, I think it's about the first 5, he was still always feeling like he was starting from scratch, still feeling that self-doubt. It's the most contradictory thing. Writers, they require some degree of ego to even think of themselves as writers, but at the same time suffer from this almost debilitating sense of self-doubt. And I know that came up a lot. It would have come up a lot in the past year, in both courses, both semesters. How it is how was the experience of that for you? And at this stage that you've come into now, how did you, or how are you, present continuous sense, how are you attempting to deal, negotiate with that constant barrage of perhaps your own criticisms before you even hear anyone else's?
It is a work in progress.
Indeed.
Because
Indeed.
I know that self-talk is the most wounding event, but at the same time, it can be the most liberating, because when you hear your own negative self-talk, it gives you, it's very revelatory, so that it helps you know what to work at. It helps you know what you're working with. And so I think for my own self, being aware of what my own insecurities are helps me to not just address them, but to be aware of them, so that when I receive criticism from others, as in when others critique my work, I can hear them above the din of my own self-talk, because other people simply see what you do not see, for good or for ill. And so it helps you achieve that much, a better balance. And it helps you to not rough up yourself quite so much.
So not to rough up yourself quite so much, indeed. I think maybe you're just asking, perhaps, is the fact that you're within this small community of the MFA, that in hearing other persons suffering from perhaps the same issues, that also opens your eyes to perhaps seeing yourself a little more clearly.
Yeah, I was just about to say it really helps that we have a network of other creatives, and we have all just started on that journey. And yes, you're right. Sharing the angst has helped, knowing that you're not in it on your own, but also getting critical feedback helps with the negative self-talk as well, because you may be quite doubtful as to this piece of work that you're putting out into the universe, and the reception of it and the critique of it may very well help you to resolve your own, doubts and insecurities about it. Not saying you're going to be reliant on external factors, but it certainly does help to give you a little bit more confidence in finding your voice and finding your expression.
Indeed, indeed. Daniela, I had a feeling you wanted to speak about this issue of self-doubt and confidence. I think everybody has some part to play in it, some way of dealing with it. If anything, I think Desiree knows.
I could.
Go ahead. Feeling that she may have been frozen here, so I'll just continue by the time she comes back on. The one person, and again, it's just perhaps, maybe it's just the energy that Desiree exudes, perhaps. But you also get this feel that she's the one person that doesn't suffer as much from self-doubt. She will actually go head on, brush, and whatever come after, she will take it and move in stride. Is that is that a natural disposition, Desiree? Or is that something that you have trained yourself to do? And I'm asking that question about how it is we are negotiating things, because it's a question that comes up a lot even with the undergrad creative writers. These young writers suffering even more than perhaps you with this issue of self-doubt, and is it good enough? I always try to find ways, how can we work through it or work around it? Desiree, how does it work? How does it work for you?
Well, I do have some doubt, but I actually like to experiment a lot, right? So a lot of my writing is actually experimentation. So I will have doubt on it. It didn't work, it did not work. Having my classmates that actually respond to my work is actually really helpful. So I did this experiment was successful. This one did fail a bit. My intention wasn't really fair enough. This time the actual pattern I thought it would work. So to me, writing is more like a fun experience, and I just experimented. And sometimes the experiments lead like really cool results. Sometimes not so much, but there is some level of doubt that still pervades, right? For some of my stories, like it'll be really cool. Then some of them is like, not so much, no. But it's all about experimentation and see what my audience likes. Once my audience is actually happy, like I'm happy too that this experiment worked out. And I keep wanting to push myself with experiment with new teams, new ideas, and just push the envelope a bit. So I enjoy experimenting. So to me, confident doubt is just keep experimenting, keep trying. You never know it actually might work out. That's my experience with it.
Is it that your approach is, I just want to have fun, first and foremost, have some fun with this? Is it perhaps the problem with it, why it is we suffer self-doubt is because we're taking it far too seriously? It is a serious matter, but we're imposing a different degree of gravity on it, like our life is on the line, our reputations, our egos, whatever it may be. And that in itself becomes its own paralysis in the process, perhaps. This way, all this seems like she's having a good time. Whereas some of us, we scratching our heads with the next answer that we have. Daniela, we lost it just at a moment there, but we were asking about that same issue of doubt and self-doubt and confidence.
Yeah, well, given what you just said, and no, I don't think that's the case for me. And I think I suffer from a very, perhaps maybe it's not as peculiar as I think, but from a very peculiar band of self-doubt because I I realized for a while now, like for a couple years now, I would say, and it's not just with writing, it comes with art too, because I'm a visual artist as well. Things that I produce that I tend to like the most, it tends to not be very well received by others. And then vice versa. Things that I write that I feel like, you know, I
think she's freezing again. Okay, so Danielle, if you can't hear me, you're breaking up a bit there.
On that deep, passionate level, it tends to be, are you hearing me now?
Yeah, but we lost a few sentences, sorry.
Oh, what was the last thing you heard?
We were thinking about this, the things that you enjoy, that not being as well received as you expected, and you were going into that.
Yes, so I guess there's this perpetual feeling of instability or loss when it comes to my own writing, because I don't know, it just feels like, who am I writing for? If I'm writing for myself primarily, does that mean that I should just throw everything else to the wind, not care about anyone else's opinions? Because at the end of the day, if it's for me, it's for me. But then on the flip side, if I do want to impact others with my writing, you know, to what extent do I have to suffer my own interest in my work?
Yeah. I think she may have frozen just again. But if I may just continue with it, because the question is a real valid one, a very, very valid one. Who am I writing for? Who am I writing for? If it is we are leaning, because I think Lynette mentioned it just a little bit before, that we could lean, we may have the tendency to lean very heavily upon external criticism, particularly if it is we are suffering from self-doubt as it is. But at the same time, this criticism doesn't necessarily mean the critiques outside doesn't necessarily have to be valid. And part of it has to do, who are you writing for and for what purpose? And I think that's one of the questions that we asked actually at the beginning of our semester last year. Who are you writing for and why? Why are you writing? Carolyn, you wanted to say?
Yes, so there are two things there, right? Yes. I think I'm writing for me. I'm writing because I have my ideas. I want to get out there, my perspective on things, right? But I also think, and when I write, you have the sense of power when you write, regardless of what the issues are going to be, what the critiques are going to be, that is. You have that sense of power when you finish a piece of work. But of course, when we reach the class with a piece of work, it's a total contrast of feeling. You go into my mini depression, then you have to go back and rework this. And there are things you're wondering, okay, how come I didn't see that? How come? I read it about 20 times, I didn't see it. And really having the others in the class look at that piece of writing, it really helps to go back. You make your notes and you go back to the drawing board, you rework. So I think too, you're writing basically to get what you want to write about. So out there in this space is somewhere it's going to connect with people. It's going to connect because people gravitate towards different things. And in some way you can't, as how I see it, I can't really write for one particular group of people. It's going to be out there and it's going to fall into different spaces. And that's how I see it.
Yeah. I was listening to a writer speak some time ago saying something a little bit similar, being, yes, we want to write or to have an impact or influence upon whoever society, whatever particular group that we are focusing on. But at the first stage is the writer must begin with self, else we start a question, then if things don't work the way that we want them to, we start a question, why are we doing this? Same thing that Daniel is asking. Yes, Danette.
Well, I was going to add that yes, you definitely write for self first. However, if a piece is not connecting with someone, and that's a word that I think resonates with me. As a writer, you want to connect with the person who's reading. It may be that your particular how you've crafted something may need some work, not exactly the entire premise of it. And sometimes that's where the critique comes in. If you've put a piece out there and you feel as though when it doesn't connect with someone, um, you feel as though you want to abandon the entire thing, there must be something of value in that. That's
Yes.
why you put pen to paper in the first instance. So I would rather go the direction of fixing a craft element,
Yeah.
rather than believing that, I was not, there's nothing valuable in what I was trying to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think if anything, it comes to that same thought about a certain balance, and the balance has to come with a degree of humility, but at the in the same sense, in the same way, a degree of purpose. You need to write something that is meaningful to you, but at the same time still open to if you're actually achieving the purpose of affecting or influencing or connecting, as you very rightly said, with your own reading audience. So vibes. Daniela, I had a sense that because I'm looking at the images I have here, and sometimes I'll see some persons seem to go off in their own thoughts, and I feel like if they had some response, something to add to them. And I saw it on your face just now. Am I right or wrong? I think she actually may be frozen here, no? Okay. Is that the case? It could be. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So another thought I had coming out of the same issue of doubt and confidence and working through, in addition to something that Desiree was also talking about with experimentation. This work that we were doing in last semester, both with Dr. Amaye and with the Reading for Writing course, but as well I'm positive in the quality courses that you're looking at now and Writer and Society, it will open you up, I think, to forms of writing, approaches to writing that you may not have considered before. And one of the things I would say for sure, the thing that struck me the most, almost every time I think about Carolyn now, I think about her movies, almost every time. Because she herself doesn't like it, right? She doesn't like it at all. At all. So therefore, when it is we introduced horror fiction, it was one thing, and Carolyn herself went off, boy, on this in a way that it was impressive. It was real impressive to me because I knew she did not like this particular genre of writing, but she chose it as her final assignment. She chose to confront it and engage it, and she did a very, very commendable job on it. So the question then is opening up to everyone else here. How was that process of actually experiencing something new? Is it something that you would have done, you think, if it was not forced upon you by a degree program? And what is the final effect of it now? Has it changed your approach to anything, whether conceptual or even in terms of the actual structuring of your writing at this point in time?
I think for me, it helps me to allow the work to have its own life. One of the things that I think was a great impediment for me was that I wanted to manage the story. And if anything, I have learned that characters dictate the story. Once you craft your character, they take you on that journey. And very often it can be the story that you wanted to tell, but how it's told is very, very different. And sometimes you find yourself with a richer story, or a story that is somewhat, it might be a little different to what you thought you wanted to see. So allowing the characters to have their own life and to be able to dictate pace has been an interesting experiment. It's one I'm still working on. I'm certainly still working on character development and looking at how much freedom I give them, because I realize the more I suffocate them, the more the story suffers. So that has been a fascinating thing for me, and also being exposed to different genres has allowed me to give form and purpose to what I've been writing before, helping me distill some of that, and then looking at what next I might want to create and how I may want to blend genres, because that has been a very exciting prospect, blending genres. I look forward to that.
Most certainly. Most certainly. How was it for anyone else? This opening up of boundaries, new horizons, really. Is it changing the way that you actually would have set out before you entered into this MFA? I will well imagine perhaps those of you who are thinking of a collection of short stories or even a novel might be actually thinking about a more diverse range of approaches. How was the expressions or something else? What are your thoughts on it? How do you feel about it?
Definitely. One of the questions I'd asked earlier on was, how can you tell whether a story concept needs to be a novel or a short story? And the response was, well, the characters will tell you, you'll know. And it was one of those infuriating answers. But a few semester and a half later, I've come to understand what that answer meant. You really do, after a while, come to, and I suppose the ability will develop in time, but you do come to an understanding. And I say that because there was a short story that I'd written, and then I felt I wanted to do more with it and try to make it into a novel. And that's one of the pieces that made me recognize I needed more tools. I needed to know how to do this thing. And in after that first semester of acquiring tools for your toolbox, I was able to return to that. And it returned to a short story format, but it was one that was far richer than what I was trying to do. So it certainly makes a great difference to be able to know how much is too much, that there's a difference between finish and stop.
Seen, indeed. Yeah, Lynette?
Yeah, well, listen, Laura couldn't have said it any better. That difference between finish and stop. But I want to agree that learning to write in different genres has certainly enriched all of the writing. As a reader, yes, you read indiscriminately, you read everything, but reading in order to produce writing in a genre and learning to master that, and then learning to blend is its own craft entirely. And certainly for me, when you get an idea now, you get a sense of the genre as well.
Yeah.
And that certainly helps with the production.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's for me.
Will you say that by this exposure to new genres in writing has actually changed some of the ideas that you would have had originally? Meaning there are some things you would not have even considered as plot lines or character lines that are now open because of this exposure.
Definitely. I don't know if perhaps you write what is familiar,
Yeah.
but by
Yeah.
being, I don't want to say forced, but certainly by having the discipline of writing everything, you really are not now intimidated by any one thing,
Yeah.
and you feel as though you can competently address a story premise if it occurs to you in a particular way. Whereas, perhaps before you may have shied away from writing horror, but now you have the skill set and you have a particular bit of confidence to say, you know what, I can work at this and craft it well enough that I am proud of that, even though this might have been something I would not have wanted to do before. So it
Yeah.
has broadened and enriched the very act of writing and how you consider your plot lines to go as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. By Carolyn, I really would like to know how was that experience, if you could remember. I don't think you'd actually forget just so. How was that experience last semester?
Um, yeah, I think from the time we discussed, we had that class on, and I was, listen, I am not going to write this at all. I remember saying that. I am not even going to attempt this. And from there, as a matter of fact, since that point, I have written a number of short stories that falls into that thriller, that horror, those elements. And I know sometimes people in class is like, oh, let's see what comes now, what she's coming with today, you know. But it it has been a really, I have grown where being exposed to different genres of writing. So now when I have an idea, the first thing that comes to me is like, okay, does it fit into this? Does it fit in here? Oh, and I would check to see which genre it would fit into best. And then I would attempt, I would start to write. But I must say I'm gravitating really towards psychological thrillers and
Are you
horror a little
serious?
bit. Yeah, I am. So really, and I think Mr. Gibson, that's you. It's your class. That particular class I will never forget. You know,
Neither
it
me.
planted a little seed in my head. So yeah, it has grown.
That is something, Fred. For me, up to this day, I still cannot watch horror movies unless I set my mind to it. So for me, if it is something is scary, I stay away. Edgar Allan Poe, I stay away. I don't want to enter into it. It takes a different sort of courage, I think, to enter into something just because I don't like it, first of all, but even more so to try to actually enter into the details, the mechanics of horror fiction or psychological thrillers to work that through. As I saying, okay. Yeah,
But,
Lynette.
but we, I
I
mean, we
want to
have
say,
we have horror all around. What
Mhm.
could be more horror filled than walking down a dark country road and you think you see a Laja bless one sukuya?
Right,
Come nah,
right,
we love
right.
horror here. Sorry, Daniela.
That's right. Yeah, Daniela.
yeah, I was gonna say that what everyone's saying is interesting, and I want to hear what Desiree has to say about it too, because I think my experience of it is so completely opposite, you know. Um,
Right, right,
Generally, I don't think I have a narrow view of genres that I'm interested in, but two genres that I
right,
don't care for at all, I never have, is realism and nonfiction.
right,
Never
right.
appealed to me. And even though I had to, deconstruct, I'm using that word very loosely because I don't think we really went into the depth of deconstruction necessarily. But
Mhm.
with the deconstruction of the genres that we did and writing within it in the little exercises in class and stuff, um, I don't know. I don't think it had that much of an impact on me. Like it was interesting for the while, it was an interesting exercise, but to say that it transformed my writing or my sense of myself as a writer in any grand significant way, it hasn't. I still
Right,
don't like nonfiction. I still don't like realism.
right,
I don't care for it. I don't like to
right.
reproduce it. I guess there's also value in things that appeal to you and things that don't, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. But that's one of the things I think we asked at the beginning of the semester as well, at least last year, about the kinds of things that you lean toward reading or you lean toward writing. And Lynette answered it in a sense. She said that we tend to move towards the familiar. So what happens then when we are, and I keep using the word forced, we are forced to engage with the unfamiliar, then what happens? Eh? So I could see both sides of it in terms of Daniela's response as well as Carolyn's response here. And I guess that is the way it would be. Some persons would really enter into something, it opens up a thought. It really does. Desiree, how was it for you? I think for you, you tend to lean very readily towards science fiction. The other aspects of the other genres that we explored in that course, how would that have been for you then?
For me, when I started the course, I was actually just in poetry. Right, in a semester one, I had like a heavy like post fiction awakening. I actually got to
Right.
experience post fiction. So having different genres there will actually help you to practice post-fiction more. Now I actually enjoy post-fiction, maybe a bit more than poetry, you know. So it's like those change, actually experiencing those genres and actually seeing which different genres, like it's my first time doing a mythology assignment as well, and like fantasy and whatnot. So like now I'm learning to actually how to mix and merge different genres. So I know which genres I actually like more than others. And it's interesting what Daniela just said in terms of non-fiction writing, because to me, like non-fiction research, I actually enjoy that too, but like it's two different parts of my brain is being used when it comes to creative writing and non-fiction. That's interesting as well. So I have my creative side, my non-fiction side, which is like separate as different. So it's like it's just actually merging those two. Then, but different genres, I actually liked having them so to experience new things. Because my first time for all them genres, actually writing a story intentionally with a particular genre in mind. So now I actually like to actually mix and match genres now. So I think it's actually very interesting having all of those experience.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I just have one final question to ask, really, as we close. Based on the year's experiences so far, experiences with yourself, dealing with the same issues of your own doubts, ego and arrogance, issues with discipline and procrastination of life going on around you, deadlines and all this, experimentation with different things that you may not have like, experimented with before, and a formation of a community that you probably may not have had in the same way before. It's different to send a story to a friend or family member, and they might just say, yes, I really like it, but can't actually go into the details of why they like it or why it is something is or isn't working, right? With this whole new, you know, this year, I could say, of experience, where do you see yourself, or what will you hope still to gain or hope to achieve for the duration of this MFA program for you and even beyond? No, that is a scratch-head question. You need.
I'm uncertain that we may have to grab a little drink before we answer that question. But no, seriously, I think the goal of the MFA, producing publishable work, even if you are not published formally, the fact that I have grown in talent and in craft, that I can produce something like this, I think that's going to set me up for continuing my journey, which is, I'm going to call that my version of success, what I would have taken away from this MFA program.
Yes, sir. Sure. Yeah. Carolyn?
Yes, as Lynette says, you know, we have the tools, we have the most important things. And I think too that having that publishable, that level of writing now is in itself a success. And from there on, it can only continue in that vein. So for me, I see it as continue my journey, as Lynette said, continue the journey, continue writing. And I believe that that is what I am going to do. You know, so I have learned so much so far. And this is the second semester. We have some months again, and I am looking forward actually to getting into the real depth of my manuscript.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. It can be a very exciting and daunting task at the very same time. Yeah, Desiree.
Me, what I take away from the course is networking, right? That's me one of my assets while doing this MFA. The course MFA, I didn't have this network I have here today. So networking for me is what I'm taking away from it. So even after the MFA is finished, after I'm done with the degree, I'll have these persons gathered here on this call. I'll have this person actually network with to share my stories with actually listen to their stories even after the MFA. To me, that's one of the most important assets within this. It's a network of persons like-minded, different topics to do because our styles could be different. But having that network, to me, is one of the most valuable aspects of this whole MFA program. Not just my craft, but having a network to share my craft with.
And that is very important. Yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. Daniela? I think, yeah.
I think, well, no, not I think, because like I said, the MFA was like the next natural step for me, right? So what I hope to gain from it really, I don't know, maybe this is short-sighted, but nothing really more than beyond proving to myself that I could do it, because I have started novels before, a couple of different ones. None of them ever got to completion, probably quarter way for the most. So, just to prove to myself that I could do it. And well, after this, I don't know, at least I'll know that I could do it. I'll have the skill. And we'll see what the next natural step is.
Yeah. I think that's a noteworthy accomplishment for most persons, at least to just get that one thing completed, that novel or that collection completed. In itself, it's a success. Laura?
I think one of the things that I treasure about the MFA, two of the things, would be the opportunity for continued development of the craft and to be able to share that, or rather to have that critiqued by others of like mind. That those two things are imperative for me, and I think some of the real treasures I would take away. That it has happened that in this time of my life I'm able to do that where I've not been able to do that before. And there's a quote from the gentleman who wrote Chariots of Fire. The author's name escapes me, but he, in one of the quotes in the book that's used in the movie, is I feel God's pleasure when I run. And I very often I switch out that word, I feel God's pleasure when I write. And in the scriptures, there are two parables that Jesus tells that refer to one's talent and developing one's talent, and that it's something that is God-given and intended to be worked on and intended to be treasured. And the MFA helps me do that at this time, and I feel it will be instrumental in allowing me to do that in the future, whether published or unpublished, whatever God wants in this time. So I'm really, really grateful for the program at this time and what it has allowed me to do in this time and what it will allow me to do, I'm sure, in the future.
Yeah, give thanks for that. I think it really speaks then to that first comment that Lynette made earlier about talent and craft. I think every one of you has that innate talent, but it has to be cultivated. It has to be cultivated. And with that now, that blossoming of that talent through cultivation, begin to experience perhaps something like, I don't know, boy, like peace. Like peace. I don't know. Okay. Well, I want to say thanks for everybody for the time that we had here together. Thanks for your thoughts, for sharing your thoughts so openly. For the persons that are viewing, thank you for joining us or having joined us and listening to this recording. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of Campus Lit Week 2022. Thanks again. Have a good evening. Bye.